The night begins with a hiss of frying oil and the clang of pans echoing across a busy restaurant kitchen. At first glance, it looks like any other evening rush, chefs moving quickly, waiters balancing trays, customers filling tables. But behind the swinging doors, a darker truth is being cooked up. Two employees laugh as they peel the plastic off boxes of meat, the color already turning gray. One of them mutters, "Who cares? Just toss some sauce on it. They'll never know." The other smirks, slipping the spoiled meat onto a sizzling pan, as if feeding strangers rotten food was nothing more than a casual joke. Their laughter feels cruel, careless echoing in a place meant to serve nourishment. This isn't just bad business, it's betrayal. At the counter, a nervous young man takes a cautious bite of his meal. He chews once, twice, then freezes. His face twists with discomfort, his eyes watering as he forces the bite down. Finally, he gathers the courage to wave over a waiter. "Excuse me," he says softly, almost apologetic. "This tastes strange. Could you check if it's fresh?" The waiter doesn't even bother to look. Instead, he sighs dramatically, rolls his eyes, and snaps back, "Sir, nothing's wrong with your food. Maybe you're just picky." A few customers nearby glance over, uncomfortable with the tone, but the staff pretend not to notice. The young man lowers his head in embarrassment, stirring his plate with his fork. He wanted help, but instead, he's made to feel like the problem. The injustice is sharp, felt not only by him, but by anyone watching. Inside the kitchen, the manager leans against a counter, arms crossed, scrolling on his phone. An employee whispers, "Another complaint about the chicken." The manager barely lifts his eyes, "Then tell them to order something else. We're not wasting new stock for one whiny customer." His words cut like steel. The staff chuckle and obey, tossing the spoiled meat back on the grill. No one dares to argue. Back in the dining area, the waiter returns with the same plate, untouched, except for a drizzle of sauce. He sets it down with a fake smile. "There you go, fresh as it gets." The young man hesitates. He knows nothing has changed, but surrounded by stares, he feels cornered into silence. Moments later, a woman at another table leans toward her friend, whispering, "This smells off. Should I say something?" Her friend shakes her head quickly. "Don't bother. They don't care. Just eat what you can." And just like that, silence spreads. Customers swallow discomfort rather than face humiliation. The staff continue laughing. Plates of spoiled food, leaving the kitchen one after another. The scene is ugly, yet captivating. Every smirk, every dismissive word, every careless motion builds a picture of greed unchecked. A business, running not on service, but on arrogance. The injustice simmers, waiting for a spark. Somewhere in the shadows of this busy dining room, unseen eyes are watching. The staff may think they're in control, but the truth is about to turn on them in ways they never imagined. For now, the spoiled food keeps flowing, and the laughter grows louder. But beneath that laughter, a storm is gathering, one that will soon expose every rotten deal. And as the night moves forward, the secret visitor draws closer to making his move. The restaurant's dining room hums with the noise of clinking glasses and muffled conversations. But behind the staff-only door, away from the customer's eyes, the mood is entirely different. Inside the cramped break room, greasy uniforms hang on hooks, and the air is thick with the scent of reheated food. A group of employees sit around a worn-out table, laughing over half-eaten meals. Their voices are low, but their words drip with arrogance. One worker leans back in his chair, smirking. "You know how much we saved this week? Thousands. Just by pushing that old stock." Another bursts out laughing, shaking his head. And the customers, they don't even notice. People will eat anything if you cover it in seasoning. The laughter echoes, sharp and unsettling. It's not just about saving money, it's about pride and deception. But in the corner of the room, a young dishwasher sits quietly, clutching a cup of water. His brow furrows with unease as the others brag. He whispers, barely audible, "What if someone gets sick?" The room falls silent for a moment. Then the manager chuckles, a cold, dismissive sound. "If they get sick, they'll blame themselves, not us. Don't think too much, kid. Just do your job." The others nod in agreement, and the nervous worker drops his gaze to the floor. Fear silences him, as it has silenced so many before. The toxic culture is clear. Speak up, and you risk everything. Stay quiet, and you survive. It's a prison without bars, built on intimidation and greed. Another employee chimes in, waving a fork for emphasis. Besides, the boss doesn't care. He's never around. As long as money's coming in, he's happy. That line lingers in the air, heavy with irony. The staff truly believe they're untouchable, shielded by their lies and by an absent owner. The dishwasher swallows hard, his hands trembling slightly. He wants to speak, to shout, to refuse to be part of this, but the stares of his coworkers keep him frozen in place. One wrong word, and he could be out of a job. The manager stands, brushing crumbs from his uniform. His voice is stern, commanding, "Listen, we all play the same game here. Keep your mouths shut, do what you're told, and nobody gets in trouble." "Got it." Reluctant nods ripple through the room. The message is clear. Obedience is survival. The laughter resumes. but it no longer sounds like humor, it sounds like chains rattling. The dishwasher forces a weak smile, pretending to join in, though his eyes betray him. They hold a quiet desperation, a longing for anyone to step in and end this corruption. For now, the whispers of deceit continue unchecked, growing louder with each boast, each cruel joke, each moment of silence from those too afraid to resist. But what the staff don't know is that their every word, their every arrogant laugh, is pushing them closer to exposure. Because out in the dining room, the secret visitor hasn't left. He's still there, listening, watching, and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The break room door swings open, and the staff shuffle back to work, still laughing, still smug, but the air feels heavier now as if the walls themselves are holding their secrets, ready to spill them at the worst possible time. The stage is set, the corruption has spoken aloud, and the cracks in their false security have begun to show. And as the night wears on, that quiet observer grows more certain, the time to reveal himself is coming soon. The bell above the restaurant door jingles softly as a man steps inside. He's dressed neatly, nothing extravagant, but sharp enough to stand out in a place like this. His stride is calm, deliberate. His eyes sweep the room, not with the casual glance of a hungry diner, but with the sharp precision of someone who sees everything. To the staff, he's just another customer, another bill to collect, another plate to fill. But what they don't know is that this man is their boss, the true owner of the restaurant, the one they believe never shows up. And tonight, he has come not as the owner they fear, but as a secret visitor, hidden in plain sight. He takes a seat near the back, close enough to observe, far enough to be ignored. A waiter approaches half-heartedly, his tone flat. "Table for one. What'll it be?" The man offers a polite smile. "Yes, I'll start with the house special." His voice is warm, steady, betraying nothing. The waiter scribbles it down quickly, already turning away, muttering under his breath about another boring order. Not once does he recognize the authority sitting right in front of him. As the man waits, his gaze drifts across the room. He sees the embarrassed young customer from earlier, still pushing food around his plate. He notices the couple whispering in unease, their eyes narrowing at the smell of their meal. Every detail sinks into his mind, painting a clear picture of how his business is being run when he isn't around. The food arrives, a plate set down without care, the edge of the dish greasy, the presentation sloppy. The waiter doesn't even pause before walking away. The man studies the food quietly. He cuts into it, lifts a bite, and tastes. His jaw tightens. The meat is sour, the seasoning heavy, as if meant to cover the rot. It's exactly what he feared. But instead of reacting, he swallows calmly, setting his fork down. His face remains composed. His silence is louder than any outburst could ever be. Across the room, two staff members lean against the counter, laughing as they watch customers eat. One whispers, "They'll never guess. Look at them, scarfing it down like it's gourmet." The other chuckles, shaking his head. "Easy money. If only the boss knew." The man's eyes narrow ever so slightly. The irony cuts deep. If only the boss knew. But the boss is sitting right in front of them. Minutes pass. He continues to observe the careless service, the dismissive attitudes, the way complaints are brushed aside. Each moment builds his quiet fury, but he masks it under a calm exterior. At one point, the nervous dishwasher passes through the dining area, carrying a stack of trays. His eyes meet the man's for a brief second. There's something in that Luca's silent plea, a flicker of hope, as if he senses this stranger isn't just another diner, but someone who might finally see the truth. The man gives him the slightest nod, a gesture small enough to go unnoticed, but enough to steady the young workers, shaking hands. Back at his table, the man places his napkin neatly on the plate. He's tasted enough. He's seen enough. The evidence is undeniable. Yet still, he doesn't move. Not yet. The time to act will come soon. But for now, patience. Because when the moment comes, it will shake this restaurant to its core. The staff carry on, blind to the storm brewing only a few feet away. To them, he's invisible. But every smirk, every careless laugh, every cruel dismissal is sealing their fate. The man leans back in his chair, watching, waiting, listening. And as the night deepens, his quiet presence grows heavier like a shadow stretched across the room. They think he's just another customer. But soon, they'll realize the truth. And when they do, their world will change forever. Because this secret visitor isn't here to eat. He's here to judge. The plate lands on the table with a careless thud. A faint stench rises from the food, sharp enough to sting the air. Behind the counter, the staff exchange knowing looks, snickering under their breath. To them, this is entertainment. Another dumb customer about to choke down their spoiled cooking. But this customer isn't who they think he is. The man, calm and composed, adjusts his napkin before lifting his fork. Every movement is deliberate, unhurried, as though he's savoring the moment before a storm. He cuts into the meat, the knife sinking too easily into its soft, spoiled texture. He brings a piece to his mouth and takes a bite. Instantly, the flavor hits him sour, rancid, covered with heavy seasoning meant to disguise the truth. His jaw tightens. His eyes flicker with controlled disgust. but he doesn't spit it out. He chews, swallows, and then sets the fork gently on the plate. Across the room, the waiter chuckles with a coworker. "Told you he wouldn't notice," he mutters. Another snorts. "People will eat garbage if you put it on a plate." Their arrogance drips into every word. The man leans back in his chair, his expression unreadable. Then, in a calm voice, he calls out to the waiter, "Excuse me, could you come here for a moment?" The waiter hesitates, then saunters over, plastering on a fake smile. "Everything fine with your meal, sir?" The man tilts his head slightly. "Tell me, how fresh is this dish?" His tone is curious, almost innocent, like someone genuinely unsure. The waiter waves a hand dismissively. "Fresh this morning. Best in town. Nothing to worry about." The man studies him, his eyes calm but piercing. "Really, because the flavor seems unusual." The waiter stiffens for a fraction of a second, then forces a laugh. "Unusual? Nah, that's just our special seasoning. Customers love it." Behind him, the staff suppress giggles, watching the exchange like it's a private joke. They're confident, too confident. The man doesn't argue. He simply nods, picks up his fork again, and takes another bite. His face betrays nothing, but inside, every chew confirms what he already knows. His staff are poisoning trust for profit. Minutes pass. He continues, eating slowly, deliberately, each mouthful a quiet act of gathering evidence. Then, he asks again, awfully thoughtfully, "Do you often serve this special seasoning, or is it just today?" The waiter shrugs, growing impatient. "Every day, sir. Our customers love it. Don't worry about what's in it." The man sets down his fork once more, folding his hands neatly on the table. His calm smile remains, but beneath it, a storm rages. Every dismissive word, every careless lie, is being carefully filed away. In the corner, the nervous dishwasher pauses as he overhears the conversation. His eyes flicker between the smug waiter and the silent customer. Something inside him stirs hope, maybe even courage. But he says nothing. "Not yet." The man takes a sip of water, clearing his throat. "Interesting," he murmurs. Then he looks up, his eyes locking on the waiter. "And if I wanted to know exactly what's in this dish, who would I ask?" The question hangs heavy in the air. The waiter falters, his smirk slipping. The chef, I guess? But trust me, sir, everything's fine." The man nods once, slowly. "Good, I'll do that." The waiter forces another smile, retreating quickly, relief flooding his face as he rejoins the others. They burst into laughter, convinced the customer has been fooled. But their laughter is hollow. Blind to the truth, sitting only a few feet away, the man places his napkin carefully over the half-eaten plate. He doesn't need another bite. He's tasted the rot, both in the food and in the culture that serves it. And now, he's certain, the evidence is in his hands, the lies fresh on their lips. But still, he waits, because timing is everything. And when the time comes, his response will shake the walls of this restaurant. For now, he rises slowly, his calm presence blending once more into the hum of the dining room. The staff laugh a little louder, more sure of themselves than ever. But they don't realize each laugh, each careless gesture, is digging their own graves. The first bite had already told him everything he needed to know. The sour temps of spoiled meat still lingered on his tongue, and the greasy texture clung stubbornly to his teeth. But the real bitterness wasn't in the food, it was in the laughter that now filled the room. Behind the counter, two waiters leaned against the register, smirking. Their voices carried openly, sharp enough for him to hear every word. "Look at him," one snickered. "He's actually eating it. Guess we don't need to try too hard." The other shook his head, chuckling. "Man, people are so easy. They'll swallow anything if you put it on a plate." The undercover boss, still just a customer to them, set his fork down slowly. He looked at the plate, then back at the men mocking him, his expression calm but his eyes darkening. "Excuse me," he said evenly, his tone polite. "Is this dish supposed to taste like this?" His question carried no accusation, no anger, just curiosity. But instead of respect, it was met with cruelty. The waiter who served him didn't even bother to lower his voice. He shrugged dramatically, rolling his eyes. "Who cares? Food's food. He'll eat it anyway." A burst of laughter followed, joined by another cook in the back. It was loud, careless, and mean, the kind of laughter that cut deeper than any insult because it revealed exactly how little they thought of the people they served. The boss's hands curled into fists beneath the table, but outwardly, he remained still, his breathing measured. He had heard greed in their whispers earlier, but this was worse. This was arrogance without shame. A young busboy nearby overheard, his face stiffening. He glanced nervously toward the customer, then back at his coworkers. His lips parted as if he might say something might defend the man who had been mocked, but fear-sealed, his voice shut. He lowered his head and kept wiping the tables, pretending not to notice. But boss watched him carefully, seeing not only the corruption in the loud voices, but the silence in the frightened ones. This wasn't just bad service, it was a culture poisoned from the inside. Another waiter leaned closer to the cook, whispering just loud enough to be overheard. "Bet he's too embarrassed to complain. People like that never say a word." Their laughter roared again, filling the space with mockery. The undercover boss picked up his glass of water, taking a slow sip, letting the sting of their words sink in. Each chuckle was like fuel poured onto the fire building quietly inside him, but he did not explode. Not yet. Instead, he tilted his head, his tone calm, almost curious. "So, this is normal here. Customers don't mind?" The waiter smirked, leaning on the counter with lazy arrogance. "Man, you'd be surprised what people put up with. As long as they pay, we don't care. Nobody's gonna shut us down." It was said with such confidence, such boldness, that even the cook chuckled in agreement. The boss studied them silently, the corners of his mouth twitching not in amusement, but in restrained fury. He had built this business with sweat and sacrifice, and here were his employees mocking the very people who kept the doors open. He placed his napkin carefully on the table. The motion slow, deliberate. His face revealed nothing, but inside, the decision was already forming. The young busboy caught his gaze for a moment. Their eyes locked, and in that silent exchange, the boy seemed to sense something in authority hidden behind the calm. He quickly looked away, heart pounding. The laughter of the staff echoed again, cruel and careless. They thought they were untouchable. They thought they were safe. But the man they mocked wasn't just a customer. He was their boss, their reckoning, and soon, they would find out. With quiet patience, he leaned back in his chair, allowing the moment to stretch. He would let them dig themselves deeper, let their arrogance paint the full picture. Every cruel chuckle, every careless insult, would become evidence. And when the truth came out, there would be no escape. The cruel laughter still rang in the air. But beneath it, something else had begun to build an invisible tension. A storm gathering strength. The boss's silence was no longer just patience. It was the calm before the inevitable. And when that storm finally broke, it would change everything. The stage was set for the moment of truth. The laughter would not last much longer. The laughter still echoed faintly in the air when the restaurant door swung open. A bell chimed overhead, soft and cheerful, a cruel contrast to the tension simmering inside. Through the doorway stepped a weary mother, with two small children clinging to her sides. Their clothes were simple, their steps heavy. The mother's eyes held exhaustion, but also hope, the kind of hope that comes when a warm meal promises even a moment's relief. The undercover boss's gaze shifted instantly. His stomach tightened. It was one thing for him to stomach spoiled food as a test, but these children, they were innocent. The mother guided them to a corner booth. She brushed the hair from her daughter's face, whispering gently, "It's okay, sweetheart. We'll eat soon." The boy climbed onto the seat beside her, rubbing his little belly. "I'm so hungry, Mama," he murmured. The words cut through the air like glass. The boss heard them, and he wasn't the only one. From behind the counter, the staff barely looked up. One waiter snorted. "Great, another family that's gonna complain the second they taste it." The cook laughed, ladling a sloppy portion of stew into a bowl. He didn't check the pot, didn't smell it, didn't care. They'll eat what they're given. Everyone does. The boss's jaw clenched. He could see the steam rising faintly from the pot and smell it too. That rancid odor of spoiled meat and sour broth. He had tasted it himself just minutes earlier. And now, without hesitation, they were about to hand it to hungry children. His fingers curled against the table. For a moment, he considered standing right then and there, ripping the bowl from their hands. But he stayed seated, silent, his eyes fixed. He had to know just how far they were willing to go. The waiter strutted toward the family's booth, a grin tugging at his lips. "Here you go, folks. Best stew in town," he announced loudly, setting the bowls down with fake cheer. The mother offered a tired smile, whispering, "Thank you." She slid the bowls toward her children. The little boy eagerly lifted his spoon, shoveling the food into his mouth. The boss's heart pounded in his chest. The boy's face twisted instantly. He coughed, gagging slightly, but tried to swallow. His sister poked at her bowl, wrinkling her nose. "Mama, it smells funny." The waiter turned away without a word, heading back to the counter. His coworkers chuckled under their breath. One leaned over and muttered, "Bet they still pay the bill." The mother's face flushed with embarrassment. She whispered to her kids, urging them softly, "Just eat a little. We don't have much money." Her voice cracked, filled with the quiet desperation of a parent trying to make do. The boss could feel the anger rising in his chest like a storm about to break. This was no longer about spoiled food or lazy service. It was cruelty, exploitation, a betrayal of the very people who trusted this place with their hard-earned money and their health. He leaned forward slightly, his eyes burning into the staff. His patience was nearly gone. The young busboy from earlier stood frozen nearby, his rag clutched in his hand. He watched the family quietly, his lips pressed tight. His eyes darted to the customer at the back. Something in the man's stillness, in his unyielding gaze, made the boy tremble, as if he knew something bigger was about to happen. The boss's thoughts raced. How many families had they poisoned like this? How many children had been forced to swallow spoiled food while these men laughed? The little girl pushed her bowl away, shaking her head. Tears welled in her eyes. "Mama, I can't eat it," she whispered. Her mother sighed, defeated. "It's all we've got, baby." The boss's hand gripped the edge of the table. His knuckles turned white. This was it. His patience, the careful mask he had worn, was splintering, but he did not move. Not yet. His voice, when it came, was calm, but carried a weight that hung heavy in the air. "Excuse me," he called out softly, toward the waiter. "Could you come here for a moment?" The laughter behind the counter dimmed, curiosity flickering across their faces. The waiter groaned, dragging his feet back toward the disguised boss. "What now?" he muttered under his breath. The boss looked up at him, eyes steady. He gestured toward the family in the corner. "Tell me, do you think that's right? To serve food like this to them?" The waiter scoffed, shrugging. "They'll eat it. Everyone does. That's just business, man." The answer hung in the air like poison dot. The boss nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. But inside, something snapped. His silence had reached its end. The storm he had been holding back was about to erupt, and when it did, the people laughing now would be laughing no longer. What began as a personal test had turned into a battle for justice for every customer, every family, every child who had been wronged. The breaking point had arrived, and the next moment would change everything. The restaurant buzzed with noise-clinking glasses, muffled laughter, and the careless chatter of staff who thought they owned the room. But in one corner, the air was still. The undercover boss sat motionless, his eyes fixed on the family forced to choke down spoiled food. His patience had been tested, stretched, and now, at last, it had snapped. The moment had come. He pushed back his chair. The scrape of wood against tile cut through the noise like thunder. Conversations halted mid. A fork clattered to the ground. The staff turned, puzzled, as the quiet customer they had mocked all evening rose to his feet. He stood tall, shoulders squared, presence commanding. There was no more hiding, no more pretending. His disguise, the plain clothes, the silence, the humility, was about to be shed. "Excuse me," his voice boomed, stronger now, filled with authority. "I've seen enough." Every eye in the room shifted toward him. The waiter who had mocked him earlier froze, a nervous laugh slipping out. What's this guy's problem now? But the man didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a black leather wallet. Slowly, deliberately, he flipped it open. Inside gleamed a gold-embossed business card, the company logo stamped bold across it. "I'm not just a customer," he declared, his gaze sweeping across the stunned staff. "I'm the owner, the boss of this entire establishment." The room fell silent. For a heartbeat, no one moved, no one breathed. And then it hit them. Shock rippled through the staff like an earthquake. The waiter's face drained of color. The cook dropped the ladle he was holding, stew splattering across the counter. The manager, who had spent the evening sneering at customers, staggered back a step, his arrogance crumbling into dread. The young busboy gasped under his breath. "The boss. That's the boss." But the man standing before them wasn't finished. His voice sharpened, each word striking like a hammer. "I came here tonight undercover," he said, pacing slowly toward the counter. "I wanted to see how my restaurant was truly being run. And what did I find? Spoiled food being served, customers mocked, families humiliated, laughter at their expense." His words rang through the air, each accusation slicing into the guilty. "You thought I was just another face you could cheat," he continued, his tone rising. "But while you laughed, I watched. While you mocked, I listened. And while you poisoned innocent people with your greed, I was here collecting every bit of proof I needed." The staff's arrogance crumbled into panic. One tried to stammer out an excuse. "Yes, sir, it's not like that. We were just what?" The boss snapped, his voice like fire. "Just cutting corners. Just filling your pockets while children eat rotten food. Just betraying the trust of every person who walks through that door." The guilty silence that followed was deafening. The family in the corner watched with wide eyes. The mother held her children close, tears brimming in her eyes, not from fear, but from relief. Finally, someone was standing up for them. The boss's eyes swept over the staff, burning with disappointment and fury. "You had one job," he thundered, "to serve people with honesty, to treat them with respect, to give them food they could trust. And you failed." The waiter who had sneered earlier stumbled forward, desperate now. "Please, sir, we didn't mean." The boss's hand shot up, silencing him instantly. "Enough. No more lies. No more excuses." His words echoed across the room like a gavel slamming down in judgment. For a long, heavy moment, no one moved. The staff's earlier arrogance had vanished, replaced by trembling fear. They knew what was coming next. The undercover boss took a step back, drawing in a slow breath. His voice lowered, but the weight of it pressed on every chest in the room. "This restaurant, my restaurant, will no longer be a place of corruption." The cook swallowed hard. The manager's lips quivered. The waiter's knees nearly buckled. The reveal was complete. The truth was out, and the boss, no longer undercover, no longer silent, was ready to pass judgment. As the staff stood frozen, the air heavy with dread, he leaned forward, his next words like a blade. "And now, it's time you faced the consequences." The storm had broken. The room stood frozen in silence. The boss's reveal still hung heavy in the air, and every staff member felt the weight of his gaze pressing down on them. Their laughter was gone. Their smirks had vanished. All that remained was fear, raw and undeniable. The boss stepped forward, his shoes echoing against the tile. Each step sounded like a countdown. Each step brought the staff closer to their reckoning. He stopped in front of the manager first, the man who had mocked customers, silenced complaints, and led this culture of corruption. "You," the boss said, his voice sharp and unflinching, "the leader of this team, the one they were supposed to look up to. Instead, you taught them greed. You taught them to laugh at customers, to cut corners, to poison people with spoiled food. Do you deny it?" The manager's lips trembled. He tried to summon his usual arrogance, but his voice cracked. I was just doing what I thought would save money. The business saved money. The boss thundered, his eyes burning. At the cost of human lives. At the cost of children's health. You call that saving money? No, that's betrayal. The manager fell silent, his head hanging low. The staff around him shifted uncomfortably, fear building in their throats. The boss turned to the cook. His apron was stained, his hands trembling as he wiped them against his sides. "And you," the boss said coldly, "you were the one stirring spoiled meat into stew. You smelled it. You knew it was rotten. And yet, you poured it into bowls and sent it out with a smile. Tell me, would you feed your own family that food?" The cook's eyes darted nervously. He swallowed hard, searching for words. I didn't have a choice," the manager said. The boss cut him off, voice rising. "You always have a choice. And tonight, you chose greed over decency. You chose corruption over honesty." The cook lowered his gaze, shame written across his face. The boss's eyes swept to the waiter, the one who had mocked him openly, who had laughed about customers eating whatever was given to them. "You," the boss said, stepping closer, "you thought this was funny. You looked into the faces of good people, struggling families, and you laughed. You sneered. You disrespected them. Tell me, are you laughing now?" The waiter's bravado cracked instantly. He stumbled back, words tumbling out in panic. I didn't mean it. I was just joking. I didn't know who you were." The boss's glare sharpened. "That's your defense, that you didn't know I was the owner. Respect should be given to every customer, not just the ones you fear. And tonight, you proved you have no respect at all." The waiter's shoulders slumped, his face pale with dread. But the boss wasn't finished. His eyes fell on the others, the ones who had stayed silent. The staff who hadn't stirred the pot, who hadn't mocked openly, but who had watched and said nothing. "And the rest of you," he said, his voice low, but heavy with disappointment. "You may think you are innocent. You may think silence excuses you. But silence is complicity. You saw families humiliated. You saw spoiled food served. You knew it was wrong, and you chose to say nothing. That makes you just as guilty." The weight of his words crushed them. One waitress began to cry softly, hiding her face in her hands. Another young man stared at the floor, unable to meet the boss's eyes. The boss drew in a breath, his chest rising with the burden of what he was about to do. His voice broke the silence like a final verdict. "You've all betrayed not just me, but every customer who walked through these doors. You betrayed their trust. You betrayed the values this restaurant was built on. And for that, there is no forgiveness." The staff looked up, fear etched across every face. The boss's voice rang out, strong and final. "You're all fired. Effective immediately." Gasps rippled through the room. The words struck like lightning, shattering any last hope they held. The manager's knees buckled. The cook dropped his rag, staring blankly at the floor. The waiter let out a strangled cry, pleading, "Please, sir, give us another chance." But the boss shook his head. His eyes held no mercy, no second chances. "Not after what I've seen. Get out, all of you." The room erupted into chaos. Chairs scraped, voices begged, tears flowed, but the boss stood firm, unmoved, his presence towering over their desperation. One by one, the staff removed their aprons, their faces pale with shock. The arrogance they once flaunted had turned to despair. Their reign of greed and cruelty had ended in a single night. With a single man's voice, as the last apron hit the floor, silence returned. The only sound was the soft sobbing of the family in the corner, the mother clutching her children, whispering, "It's okay now." The boss turned to them, his stern expression softening. He gave a small nod of reassurance. Justice had been served, but his work was not yet finished. Because now, it was time to rebuild. The morning after the storm felt strangely quiet. The restaurant, once filled with chatter, laughter, and sometimes arrogance, now stood dark with its doors locked. A bold sign hung at the entrance, closed for renovation and reform. Inside, the air carried a different weight, not the stench of spoiled food, but the crisp scent of fresh paint and new beginnings. The boss walked slowly through the empty dining hall, his footsteps echoing. He paused at each table, remembering the faces of families who had been disrespected, the children who had unknowingly eaten spoiled meals. His fists tightened at the thought. This place, he whispered to himself, was supposed to be a safe haven, a place of nourishment, of dignity. Never again will it be a place of betrayal. The scene shifted days later, when customers, those who had once stormed out in anger or left in silence, were invited back. But this time, it wasn't for a meal. It was for an apology. One by one, the wronged families entered. The single mother, with her 2 children, the elderly couple who had been laughed at, the quiet man who had noticed something was wrong but kept eating anyway. They sat in the freshly cleaned hall, uncertain, still carrying wounds from their experiences. The boss stepped forward, no longer undercover, but in full authority. His voice carried both strength and humility. To everyone here, I owe you more than words. You placed your trust in this restaurant, and we betrayed that trust. For that, I am deeply sorry. He walked table to table, handing each family an envelope. Inside was not just a full refund, but additional compensation, his way of showing that their pain had been heard, their dignity restored. The single mother's eyes filled with tears as she looked up at him. Nobody has ever apologized to me like this, she whispered. The boss placed a hand on her shoulder. You deserved better. From now on, you'll get nothing less. Applause broke out across the room, not because of money, but because of honesty. In that moment, the walls of shame began to crumble, replaced by something stronger, trust. But rebuilding wasn't just about apologies. It was about transformation. The restaurant remained closed for weeks as new systems were built from the ground up. Fresh suppliers were chosen carefully. Every shipment of food was double-checked for quality. A strict policy was posted on the wall. If it's not good enough for family, it's not good enough for our customers. Then came the hiring. This time, there were no shortcuts. Every applicant faced tough questions, not just about skills, but about values. The boss sat across from one young man during an interview. Tell me, he asked, why do you want to work here? The applicant hesitated before answering. Because I want to be part of something honest. I've worked in places where cutting corners was normal, and it never felt right. I want to serve people with pride. The boss smiled slightly. That's the answer I've been waiting to hear. Soon, the restaurant filled with fresh faces, waiters who greeted customers with genuine warmth, cooks who treated every ingredient with respect, managers who understood that leadership meant responsibility, not exploitation. Training sessions weren't just about food safety or service etiquette. They were about empathy, about dignity, about treating every customer as if they were family. Weeks later, the grand reopening arrived. The door swung open to a line of waiting customers, some hesitant, some hopeful. The once broken community now stood together, curious to see if this place truly had changed. The new staff greeted them with bright smiles. Dishes arrived fresh, steaming, and carefully prepared. Glasses of water sparkled clean in the light. The difference was undeniable. At one table, the elderly couple who had once been mocked tasted their meals. The old man set his fork down and looked around. This is the way it should have always been, he said softly. His wife nodded, her eyes brimming with gratitude. At another table, the single mother's children laughed as they dug into their meals, safe, delicious, and served with respect. From across the room, the boss watched quietly. He didn't need applause or recognition. The real victory was in their smiles, in the peace that had returned to their faces. As the night wore on, the restaurant buzzed, not with greed or arrogance, but with joy. And above it all, the boss's voice echoed in his mind. This business will no longer be built on lies. It will be built on truth, on respect, on people who care. And though the wounds of betrayal would never be forgotten, something far greater was being born, something stronger than greed, brighter than shame. A restaurant reborn, a community healed. But little did the boss know, the journey wasn't over. Because with every rebuilding comes a new challenge, one that tests whether the lessons learned will stand the test of time. And that test was coming sooner than anyone expected. The night was alive again. The restaurant, once tainted with betrayal, now glowed with warmth and laughter. Families filled the tables. Children's voices mingled with the clinking of silverware, and the scent of fresh, carefully prepared meals drifted through the air. The boss stood in the corner, arms folded, watching quietly. His heart, once heavy with anger and disappointment, now felt lighter. Yet deep within him, a lesson echoed louder than the joy around him. He whispered to himself, almost as though speaking to the walls of the very building he rebuilt. Money made from dishonesty burns faster than it's earned, but integrity that builds empires that never fall. His words carried weight, shaped by the scars of everything he had seen. A server approached him, one of the newly hired staff, her hand slightly trembling with a tray in her grip. "Sir," she said softly, "I just wanted to thank you for giving me a chance. This job isn't just work to its purpose. I've never worked somewhere where honesty mattered this much." The boss smiled. "That's because honesty is the foundation of everything we do now. Without it, all of this," he gestured at the buzzing restaurant, "the happy families, the safe food, would mean nothing." The camera of the story shifted outward, showing more than just food being served. It showed dignity being restored. It showed respect flowing in both directions, staff to customers, and customers back to staff. But as he watched, the boss remembered the darker days, the moments where spoiled food was shoved onto plates, where mocking laughter filled the kitchen, where greed spoke louder than conscience. He closed his eyes for a moment, as if to seal those memories away. Then he opened them again, with resolve sharper than steel. To lead, he thought, isn't just about profit. It's about principle. It's about being the first to set the standard, even when no one's watching. Later that evening, as the crowd thinned and only a few tables remained, the boss gathered his new staff together. The young cooks, the fresh-faced servers, the managers eager to prove themselves all circled around him. He spoke, not as an owner giving orders, but as a man sharing truth. "Listen closely," he began. "This place nearly fell apart, not because of the food, not because of the building, but because people chose greed over integrity. They thought cutting corners would bring them more. But what happened? They lost everything." The staff nodded, hanging on to his every word. He leaned forward, his tone both gentle and firm. "Never forget this. Money earned dishonestly never lasts. It crumbles. But money earned with honesty, with pride, with respect, that lasts forever. Integrity isn't just a word. It's the difference between betrayal and trust, between failure and legacy." A young cook raised his hand timidly. "Sir, what if someone tempts us to take shortcuts, to lie, or to cheat?" The boss's eyes narrowed, but his voice remained calm. "Then you remember why you're here. You remember the families who sit at those tables. You remember the children who deserve safe food, the elders who deserve respect. And you remember that nothing is worth losing your honor." The room fell silent. But it was the kind of silence filled with meaning. Every staff member stood a little taller, their pride reshaped by his words. As the night came to a close, the last customer left and the restaurant lights dimmed. The boss remained alone, walking through the dining room one final time. He ran his fingers across the polished tables, glanced at the spotless kitchen, and exhaled deeply. The restaurant had been broken, but now it stood stronger than before. And it wasn't because of the money spent, it was because of the integrity invested. He stepped outside, the cool night air brushing against his face. Above him, the city lights flickered, as if nodding in agreement to the lesson he carried. He turned back to look at the glowing sign of his restaurant. For a moment, he smiled, not the smile of a man who had won a battle, but the smile of a leader who had planted a seed. And with steady conviction, his final thought echoed like a promise to all who would ever hear his story. Leadership is not measured by how much you gain, but by how much you give. Integrity is the real empire, and it will outlive us all. The screen faded with the image of the restaurant once corrupted, now redeemed, standing as a beacon of honesty, justice, and hope. And in that closing frame, one truth lingered in the hearts of the audience. When greed fails, integrity endures.